Hey everybody, welcome back to Leosophy. Sorry that this video is so late going out, but I've been busy with a few things and had some technical issues. Anyway, it's not important. This is the last episode, I think, of the beekeeping, unless I think of something else that's relevant to it. And this is about sort of the reward of beekeeping. Aside from actually interacting with a really fascinating animal, I think one of the things that people are most interested in when it comes to beekeeping is honey. And so this is where, unfortunately, hopefully you'll have had bees for a year. They've been healthy. Things have been going well. You've already made that big initial investment in a hive, and now it's been a year, really more like a year and a half since you've had them, and you're ready to reap the rewards, right? Well, in order to do that, unfortunately, you are going to need more equipment. Bare minimum, you are going to need that honey super, and you are going to need some means of extracting the honey. Now, I'll get a little bit further into that. To begin with, you absolutely, before you can rob them, earlier that year, once they've filled up 2 deep bodies, in some places, like tropical areas, you might be able to get away with 1 deep body because they don't have to overwinter, but two deep bodies, 2 hives, in other words, let's see, 8 to 10 frames of brood-in honey for themselves. Now they've got enough to last winter. Now you can add a super. It looks like a small version of a deep body, and it has smaller frames in it. And that's the one where I said that I prefer actually putting fewer frames, so there's actually wider comb for actual honey. You could maybe even that year, if they fill that one up, you might get away with 2 supers, which is even better, even more honey. And then around that time, usually once that honey is cured, it's usually in the ballpark of like late August, mid-September, surely no later than early October. They've got it capped, which means that it's ready. If you eat uncapped honey, it's not fully fermented, and it could still have pathogens in it, so don't ever do that. I did that once and nothing happened, but I don't recommend it. But anyway, once that's ready, then you have to rob the bees. So what do? Well, very much like opening the hive, you put some smoke in the front, in the entrance. You put some smoke on top. You wait a minute. You open it up, and now you've got to find a way to get rid of all those bees in the top. And you really, really need to make sure there's no queen up there. Some people use queen excluders to ensure that there's no brood at all in the supers. And that's really a point of contention. I have no problem with queen excluders personally, but some people really don't like them because they say that it decreases the productivity of the bees. But anyway, you want to make sure, and there's different ways you can do that. You can actually add things that naturally repel the bees in these little packets, and it causes them all to go down as far as they can to the actual deep bodies. Or you can even, I'm not kidding, if you make sure that there's no queen up top, you can actually take an air hose and just spray them away from it. But bottom line, you want to make sure there's no bees on the frames, and then you'll take that lid and you'll put it back on top of the deep body now that the super's been taken away, and you can take those frames and you can do whatever you want with them. If you used waxless, like oh man, what's the word for that? Foundationless frames for your supers, you can actually just cut the comb with a knife and put them in boxes and sell raw comb honey. And some people pay through the nose for raw comb honey. The other possibility, and this is where it starts getting expensive, is an extractor. An extractor is just a big cylinder of metal with 2 bare minimum, little vices that you put the frames in, and you spin it, and it cranks, and the centrifugal force causes the honey to come out, and then it goes to the bottom, and then there's a little tap, and you can strain that honey through, say, a sieve, and now you've got raw, non-waxy honey to use or sell. And then another thing you can do, which is very popular in Europe that nobody really does here, that I think is starting to get more popular, is this wonderful thing called creamed honey, where you basically can take that honey and you let a little bit of it, just a tiny amount, crystallize, like, the kind where it goes bad, you don't like it, and then you whip it with. You can actually use a stand mixer for this, and it alters the structure of the honey to where it's almost it's like somebody's added some sort of dairy product to it. It's a little bit more opaque rather than translucent, and it just has a creamier texture. It's very unusual, and it's hard to even believe once you've actually seen and tasted it that it's just honey. Like it's 100% honey. It's just structurally been altered through agitation. Really neat stuff. But those are really the main ways that you can extract it. And then there's a few other things that some people will do, like a lot of people will use capping knives, which is a hot electric knife that you run over the caps in order to break them, and then it makes extrusion a lot easier. You could also just use a regular knife before you put it into an extractor. And some people actually will take a big cauldron and they'll heat up the wax once they're done and purify it and use it in soap making and other arts and crafts and whatnot that make candles that make use of beeswax. So there's a lot of things you can actually do. Some people even take that wax and make new foundations for new frames. So there's a lot of profit in honey if you work on a budget and you use a large enough scale for that to happen. But if you just have one hive, you're going to be operating on a much tighter budget, and you'd probably be better off using foundationless frames for the supers and just selling like raw comb honey. That's my personal recommendation until you start getting more hives, and that's kind of how it works. You know, it reminds me of that line in what was it, Clint Eastwood movie? You know what I'm talking about? Where that one kid's asking about tools, and he's like, I don't have all these tools. And he's like, well, this is something you acquire over many years. That's kind of, start with one beehive, or two even. That way you can make comparisons. But, work your way up. Don't jump into it and have, 18 beehives the first year and do everything trial and error. That would be a nightmare. And it wouldn't be a way to actually profit off bees. And then there's other things you can start doing with said products. You can make mead. Mead is one of the easiest forms of alcohol to make. All you really have to do is heat water, add it to honey to a certain dilution point. You can add champagne yeast to it if you want to make sure that it actually ferments properly. Use sterile equipment, and within a month you should have very cheap, very sweet mead. And if you wait longer, much longer, a year or so, you could have dry mead that's almost on par with top-notch white wine that's crisp and clear, and probably retail for about $15 for 750 milliliters worth, and you could get quite a bit of that out of just a single super. So it's just something to bear in mind, that this is sort of the end game that a lot of people have when it comes to bees. But I don't know anybody personally who's gotten into bees without thinking of honey initially, but ultimately just falls in love with the animal, and they're more passionate about that than the end game at that point. It's very similar with a lot of people I know who do, small scale chicken raising. Initially they're thinking, coq au vin and eggs and fried chicken, and then they love chickens. It's very similar. It's hard not to love these animals once you've seen their day-to-day operations and everything. The next episode I might actually cover one more thing, which is just overall checking on the hive, like the actual process. Because now that I'm talking about robbing them, I'm realizing that some of the detail I had to gloss over about robbing them just because it entails the same process of opening the hive. So I'll probably go over that for the next one. So I guess this is the penultimate episode. Like, share, subscribe, keep asking questions. Bye.